Dr. Ross Grant, for many years we've known about the perils of high cholesterol, and particularly the LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. But more recently we're understanding it's not just the level of LDL cholesterol, it's whether it's oxidised or not. Now you're a researcher in the field of this oxidative stress. Explain, what is oxidative stress?
Yeah, well Darren, oxidative stress is a term that we give to a group of molecules, we call them rogue molecules.
Rogue.
That actually have, they're called free radicals, and they have an unpaired electron. Superoxide is an example, and what these molecules do is that they can actually create a lot of damage to tissue within the body, and that can be to any tissue. Could be the heart, could be the brain, could be the liver, could be the lungs.
Right, so where do these free radicals come from?
Yeah, free radicals, the body's exposed to lots of them. In fact, we're getting exposed to them every day, and they come from different sources. If we look at an obvious one, if you spend too much time out in the sun, you know you can prematurely age your skin. Well, that is because of direct UV damage and also the fact that you produce a lot more free radicals as a result of that sun exposure.
Okay.
You can also get it from cigarette smoke, which can do damage to the lung, free radical damage to other organs as well, including the blood vessel.
And so it's sun, it's toxins into our body like smoke. Any other areas?
Yeah, well, you can get it, we know now. It seems the types of foods that you eat can also increase your free radical activity and your free radical exposure. Right,
so the foods we consume can actually increase our oxidative stress placed upon our body.
That's correct.
Now, I understand you have an experiment that you're going to use to demonstrate this for us today. Can you tell me about that?
That's right. So you know that high cholesterol is not good for you, and but what we're finding is actually it's the oxidised high cholesterol, which is the bad bit.
Yes.
And to oxidise that high cholesterol, we think that it's related to certain types of foods, particularly the high sugar, high fat foods.
Right.
So what we're going to do...
That we all love.
That we all love. So what we're going to do, we've got a little experiment where we're going to actually feed you a high sugar, high fat, turns out to be a frozen dessert, and we're going to feed you that and then see in a short time afterwards whether or not your free radical activity or free radical damage has occurred.
Well, for the sake of science, bring on the dessert, I say.
All right, terrific.
Okay, Ross, I see you have the results back. We're both willing to share, so tell us what's the damage.
Well, Darren, you got a 22% increase in your free radical damage.
So I've had a 22% increase in my damage just from that one meal.
Just from that one meal.
You've got to be joking.
Yeah,
it's
quite
incredible.
Surprising. But Paul, 57% increase.
57%! Well, I don't feel so bad. Well, actually, I do. I still feel bad, but 57%, that is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Look, the reason for it, and we know that there is variability between individuals in any case, but the free radical damage that you've seen as a result of after that one meal, high fat, high sugar, is probably linked also to the amount of antioxidants that you've got in order to mop up or at least to modify the amount of free radical damage.
So what do you mean by antioxidants?
Well, antioxidants are what the body has in order to try and protect itself against free radicals. So we know that the food that you've just eaten increases your free radical activity, and in yours it went up to give 22% more damage to your lipids, and in Paul's 57% more damage to your lipids.
So why more in Paul than I?
Well, one of the things we do know is that exercise increases your antioxidant capacity.
Right.
So you exercise quite a bit more than Paul, and we think that under the circumstances your antioxidant capacity is likely to be quite a bit higher.
Right, so obviously antioxidants then are very helpful. Are there other ways that we can get them?
Yes, there are. So while there are foods like the high-fat, high-sugar food that you had can increase your free radical damage, there are also the dark-coloured fruits and vegetables that actually can increase your antioxidant capacity. So the more you have of the dark-coloured fruits and vegetables, those plant-based whole foods, they seem to increase your antioxidants, whereas the high-fat, high-sugar foods seem to increase your free radicals.
So I just find this amazing, that what this is evidence for is that really every meal counts, doesn't it? It's not like years of abuse of eating the wrong kind of foods will eventually cause damage. It seems like every meal can actually have an adverse effect on our health.
That's right, Darren. It seems that what we're finding out now is that oxidative activity, that can happen at each meal. And it can happen at breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea. So you keep doing the damage, and of course that rolls over into something that the body ultimately results in disease. But if you treat your body well, in other words, exercise, increase your antioxidant activity, and not take in foods that are going to increase your free radicals, such as the high fat, high sugar, but increase your antioxidants, such as the dark coloured fruits and veggies, those whole food, plant-based foods, then it seems that you'll be at much less risk of developing diseases like heart disease.
Well, I need to thank you, Dr. Grant, for subjecting us to this little experiment.
If the Great Australian Ice Creamery goes out of business, please don't blame me for that. It's really good to be with you here this morning and to be able to fellowship with you. It's always a challenge coming into a new Adventist church. But I've discovered that there's one thing that every Adventist church has, and that's a clock on the back wall so the preacher can tell what time it is. You got two of them. Oh, mate, that's... Looks like we've got problems. Oops, that's it. The book of Deuteronomy is an interesting book because it's actually written as a sermon. It takes about 2.5 hours to read it through. We're not going to read it through this morning. But Deuteronomy is written right at the end of Moses' life. Moses has led the children of Israel for 40 years in the wilderness. And at the end of his ministry, he calls them all together and he preaches this sermon called Deuteronomy. And towards the end of the book, he gives them this challenge and he said, "Today I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life so that you and your descendants might live." Lord, I do pray that you'll be with us today as we explore a little bit more about what it means to be healthy. For Jesus' sake, amen. I have a hobby. I have a number of hobbies, but one of my hobbies is to actually go into cemeteries and check out the tombstones. And every now and again you come across some really interesting tombstones, and these are some of the ones I've found. Here lies Elizabeth, wife of Major General Hamilton, who was married for 47 years and never did one thing to disoblige her husband. She died 14th of April, 1749. Now, I can tell you without fear of contradiction that that will not be my wife's epitaph. What about this one here, just by way of contrast? Here lies Anne, wife of Ben. Here let her lie, now she has peace, and so does Ben. And this is another one that I found. Here lies the body of Ezekiel Archie, aged 102. Only the good die young. This is one actually from an English cemetery, erected to the memory of John McFarland, drowned in the waters of the Leith by a few affectionate friends. And this is an American tombstone, actually one of my favourite tombstones, sacred to the memory of Major James Bush, who was killed by the accidental discharge of a pistol by his orderly, 14th of April, 1831. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. And this is one that actually caught my attention. Here lies the body of Paul Meredith, who lived a merry life and died a merry death. And it just so happens that my name is Paul Meredith Rankin. And one of these days, there's going to be a tombstone that reads something like this. And on that tombstone are going to be 2 dates. Now, while I've got no control over the first date on that tombstone, I have a fair bit of control over the second date on my tombstone. My youngest daughter, about 5 years ago, said to me, "Dad, I've got it all figured out. On your 102nd birthday, we're going to go hang gliding in the morning. We're going to come home, have a big party. You're going to go to bed that night and you won't wake up in the morning." And I said, "Rachel, that would suit me just fine. That would be really cool." But the reality of the matter is that because we live in a sinful world, all of us are born and at some stage we die. And I'd like to suggest to you that we have a responsibility for how long that is and for how we use that period. And I'd like to summarise the principles of health this morning with the acronym CREATION. I've plagiarised this from Florida Hospital. But Creation Health, and each letter for creation stands for a key factor of health. The first point in health is choice. The reality of the matter is that each of us have to make choices, and regular daily choices, about whether it's to eat the high-fat, high-sugar frozen dessert. And interestingly, we had to shoot that footage twice because the first time they messed up the camera. And Darren and I, we'd been on a plant-based diet for some time, and we decided if we were going to have ice cream, we'd get really good ice cream. So we went out and we bought really expensive ice cream. We had to have 2 bowls of them. We were both sick for 3 days afterwards. But it's about choice. And one of the fundamental principles of Christianity, or the fundamental principle of Christianity, is love. And love depends on choice. And I learnt as a 16-year-old in high school, staring across the classroom at Jenny, that no matter how hard I stared at Jenny, I couldn't force her to love me. I actually met Jenny about 2 years ago, and I'm glad she never did love me, but that's another story. But the reality of the matter is that we are continually faced with choices. And for some of those choices can be confusing. And for some of us, those choices can be a little bit scary. And we're cautious about making those choices. And each of us approach choices in a different way. Now, this is actually an American study. It doesn't apply in Australia. But they asked 500 American women to go to a mall and buy a pair of jeans. And they tracked the route that the women took and read. And they asked 500 men to go to the same mall and buy a pair of jeans. And you can see the route that the men took. As I said, it's an American study. It's not an Australian study. But the reality is that when it comes to choices, we all approach choices differently. But the reality of the matter is, no matter how we approach them, we have to make choices. And the fundamental principle of health is choice. So that C for creation stands for choice. And the R for creation stands for rest. And Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 11, tells us that there's one day a week when God created us, or God designed for us to take some time out to rest, to come away and rest. And we all know Exodus chapter 20 verses 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, for in 6 days, and on the 7th day you shall rest. And that is a core part of the way that God created us, was to have that time of rest. But rest is also important at different times. I spend a lot of time in my office working on a computer, and it's really important that I take regular breaks from that computer. Otherwise my shoulders and my arms start to get very, very sore and very painful. But there's also rest that we need to take on an annual basis, where we get annual leave. And I had a look at my wife's payslip a couple of weeks ago, and she's got 16 weeks annual leave owing to her. And I said, Sonia, annual leave's not like a bank account. The more you have, the better. It's taken there for us to take a break and take some time out to refresh ourselves. And so that rest is important to us in different facets and in different ways, but it's an integral to how we're put together as human beings. And then there's a rest at night, trying to get 8 hours sleep a night. Now, if you've got young children, getting 8 hours sleep a night can be a real challenge. And for some of us, the way we work, getting 8 hours sleep a night can be a real challenge. But we were designed to have that regular rest every night. So what does C stand for? Choice. R stands for? And E stands for? E stands for environment. Okay? And Psalms chapter 24, verse 1 states that everything that was created for one purpose. And that purpose was to give honour to God. And if we destroy any of that creation, we take away from the ability of that creation to give honour to God. And so we have a responsibility for our environment. And environmental in the big way. I noticed the Australian government has just decided to put more money into climate change research. And has given CSIRO extra money to study that. And that's good. And we see major environmental disasters like oil tankers leaking oil all over the place, or oil wells blowing up. And we don't have a lot of control over that. But we do have a control over our environment. We control the type of environment we create in our homes for our children. We control the environment in our office. And we control what we buy from the supermarket and how we package what we buy from the supermarket. All of these little things we have control over. And that environment is really, really important. And the way that we eat, the way that we choose to purchase, has impact not just on our health, but also on the environment. And this was illustrated in a conversation I heard on my father-in-law's farm about 18 months ago, where the cow says to the calf, "My only consolation is that by eating us, they're killing themselves." And what we do has a major impact on our environment. So C stands for, R stands for, E stands for, and A stands for activity. Proverbs 6 verse 6 tells us we shouldn't be lazy. We were created to move. And do you realise that the average Australian now gets 16 kilometres a day less exercise than they did in 1950? Think about that just for a moment. For those of you that are old enough to remember what it was like back in I can only remember back to the 60s, but back in those days, I started school in 1962, and school was about 3.5 kilometres away. And how do you think I got to school? I walked. That was just what everyone did. And I lived down the end of a dead-end street, and I would start walking, and there was a girl about 50 metres down the road. She would join me, and there was a whole group of us. By the time we got to school, we walked. That was just what we did. I now live about 300 metres from Avondale High School, and my next door neighbour drives their kids to school. It's just an entirely different environment. We spend so much time staring at screens these days, not being active. And that activity has a major impact on our health. C stands for, R stands for, E stands for, A stands for, and T stands for trust. And trust is integrally important. All of you have exercised trust today. You all sat down on the pew you're sitting down, trusting that the pew wouldn't collapse on you when you sat in it. And it's trust in the people that we live with, trust in the people that we associated with, and also trust in God, trust in our divine Heavenly Father. We see so much happening in the world today which we have no control over. We see so much happening in the world today which is a little bit scary. I mean, just look at the elections taking place in the United States at the moment, and things are getting pretty scary. But we know that we have a God who is in control of the world. And God says that all things work together for good. He doesn't say that all things are good, but he says if we give to God what happens, he will make good come out of that. However, sometimes, particularly for me growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, getting a handle on this picture of God can be a little bit confusing. And it used to be that my picture of God was like the policeman waiting to give a kid a parking ticket. And you remember that song that we used to sing as kids, "Oh, be careful, little hands, what you do? For the Father up above is what? Looking down in love." And sometimes it's easy for us to confuse what that looking down in love is all about. And sometimes we wonder whether the words of the song should be, "For the Father up above will squash you like a bug." And that's not what the word says, what the song says. And it wasn't until I actually had children of my own that I realised what it was. And I can remember when my youngest daughter was about 2, and I was working up on the roof, actually putting in a solar hot water system. And I turned round and I found my 2-year-old daughter crawling across the roof behind me. And I picked her up and very gently carried her down the ladder and gave her to her mother and said, "Please don't come up on the roof again." And she screamed blue murder because she wanted to be on the roof with her dad. But why did I take her off the roof? Because I loved her and was concerned about her. And God loves us and is concerned about us. So C stands for, R stands for, E stands for, A stands for, T stands for, and I stands for interpersonal relationships. Exodus chapter 20, verse 18 says, "It is not good for man to be alone." And God created us to be social beings. And part of what you're doing this morning by coming to church here is to rest and take time out to be with God, that's great. But it's also time to socialise and time to be social with each other, talk to friends, catch up with people. That interpersonal relationships are important in our family relationships, in our work relationships. And there's a whole lot of research out there that shows people who have good interpersonal relationships have better health. So, C stands for, R stands for, where are we? E stands for, A stands for, T stands for, I stands for relationships, and O stands for outlook. And part of the fact that we have choice means we can interpret what happens to us. Let me give you an example. If you look at that picture up on the screen, what do you see? What do you see? A girl. Do any of you see anything else? Okay, some of you can see a girl and some of you can see an old lady. And it depends on how you look at that picture. There's an eye and a nose and a chin and an ear of a young lady. Or there is, where are we? A nose and a mouth and a chin and an eye of an old lady. It's the same picture, but we can see different things in that picture. What about if I show you this picture? Okay? Some people see two faces and some people see a vase or a bowl. The same picture. Or what about this illustration? Okay? It's exactly the same picture. But if you turn the picture up, it looks quite different from what it does if you turn it the other way up. I actually did this presentation, or a similar presentation, used this illustration when I was doing a presentation to a non-Adventist group. And one of the blokes said, that's what happens when I go to the pub. After I have 6 beers, they all look good. Okay? And the way that we perceive the world, the way that we look at the world, is a choice that we make. Okay? I've been married to Sonia for 30 years now. I believe she's the most beautiful woman in the world. But that's a choice I make. She's beautiful, that's beside the point. But we make a choice. And that's very, very important in our health. So we've got C stands for, R stands for, E stands for, A stands for, T stands for, I stands for, O stands for, and N stands for nutrition. It wouldn't be a Seventh-day Adventist church unless we talked about nutrition, would it, when it comes to health? My father's a Seventh-day Adventist minister, or he's retired now. And I can remember as a kid, Dad would do Bible studies. And it seemed like about the third or the fourth Bible study, Mum would go along and she'd teach them how to cook gluten steaks. And it was almost like you had to learn to cook gluten steaks before you could get baptised. And sometimes, as a Seventh-day Adventist, we've made nutrition the pinnacle of health. Now, nutrition is crucially important to our health. But it's not all there is to health. There is so much more to health than just nutrition. However, nutrition is important. And I'd like to illustrate that for you just a little way. Do you have any idea how much sugar is in that one 600ml bottle of Fanta? Okay, let me show you. Okay, it says there's 74 grams of sugar. Now, can I get you two boys to come and give me a hand? Can you come and help me? We've got a teaspoon here. Now that teaspoon holds 5 grams of sugar. So how many 5s are there in 74? Who's good at math? 15? Someone's going to help them. Who was that? Who said 15? Well done, mate. Okay, so can you hold that for me? And can you hold that teaspoon? And I've got some sugar here. And I want you to put 15 teaspoons of sugar in that glass. So let's count. 1, 2, that's only half a teaspoon. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 13 and a half, 14, 15. Okay, hold that up. Hold it up. You can hold it up. Hold that up. That's how much sugar there is in one 600ml bottle of Fanta. Now, if you have a bottle of Fanta, you've got to have a chocolate bar with a bottle of Fanta, don't you? Okay? So in that Moro bar is 38 grams of sugar. So how many 5s are there in 38? 7.5. So let's put another 7.5 teaspoons of sugar in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. Excellent. Thank you. Now hold that up. Okay? 1 bottle of Fanta and 1 Moro bar. You've had the equivalent of that much sugar. Thanks, boys. Now, when I was a kid, I lived in Papua New Guinea. My parents were missionaries out there. And we used to eat sugar cane. It's probably a bit cold to grow sugar cane down this part, but Andy's come from Bundaberg where they grow sugar cane up that way. And we used to eat the sugar cane. Have any of you ever eaten sugar cane? Okay? You cut it and you peel it and you chew it up. How much sugar cane can you eat in one go? Maybe 300 mil? Half a metre maximum? That's if you're really pushing it. Do you realise how much sugar cane it takes to produce 1 teaspoon of sugar? It takes 2 metres of sugar cane to produce 1 teaspoon of sugar. So, we had 17 plus 7.5. How much is that? If you add that up, 24, about 24, 25. That's, pardon? 25. So that's 50 metres of sugar cane we've got in 1 bottle of Fanta and 1 Moro bar. Now, is there anyone here that could eat 50 metres of sugar cane? Yeah, over how long? How long would it take you? Take all year, would it? Okay, and that is what we've done. We've taken food the way that God grew it, and we've changed it and processed it in order to eat. And that's had major impact. This is a statue of David, okay, with some good Australian shorts on, okay? And David went for a 2-year tour of North America. And when David came back from his 2-year tour of North America, this is what David looked like. And the sponsors for David's tour of North America, and we now have in our Western world, because of the change in our diet, an enormous explosion of obesity. And that obesity has a whole pile of diseases associated with it. And people these days are dying from lifestyle diseases rather than from infectious diseases, which they used to a few years ago. That's actually a photo of me taken on my wedding day. That was in October 5, it'll be 30 years that I will have been married. At that stage, I weighed about 95 kilos. And yes, that is my hair, it's not a wig. One thing CHIP program's not good at is growing hair, but apart from that, it's excellent. Okay, that on the left there is a photo of me taken about 11 years ago. And I was a pastor in Christchurch, and I went and saw the doctor. And the doctor did some blood tests, told me that my cholesterol was 8.2, which is very, very high. My blood pressure was about 160 on 125. My blood sugar levels were just borderline type 2 diabetes. And the doctor said to me, he said, Paul, you've got to make some changes. We need to put you on some medication. And he said, if you continue like this, you're not going to see your grandchildren grow up. And so I adopted the principles of the CHIP program. Drastically changed. I've always been a vegetarian. But in my parish, I knew where all the bakeries were, and I knew all the bakers by Christian name, and I knew which one had the best Napoleons and the best custard slice. And I changed my diet dramatically. And I started getting some exercise. And I lost 35 kilos in weight. And the difference that has made for me has been absolutely phenomenal. My cholesterol now sits about 4.2. My blood pressure is 116 on 65 last time I had checked it. My blood sugar sits under 5. All of that's come good. But it's not just that. It's given me energy to do things I couldn't have done before. A few years ago, a group of us rode our bikes from the bottom of New Zealand to the top of New Zealand. Someone said, did you ride across New Zealand? I said, no, it only takes 15 minutes to ride across New Zealand. We rode the length of New Zealand, 2,347 kilometres. We averaged 100 kilometres a day. And when I finally arrived at Cape Reinga, it was an amazing experience to get there and have completed that. And I couldn't have done that before I made lifestyle changes. I'd always wanted to fly hang gliders. And after I lost weight, I was able to take up hang glider flying. That's me flying off Catherine Hill Bay, just near Avondale College there. And that's been good. But it's also given me a lot more ability to serve God. It hasn't changed my relationship with God. My salvation is not determined by what I eat. My salvation is determined by my relationship with Jesus Christ. But as a healthy individual, I have more ability and more energy to commit to God. My children used to complain that I never had the energy to play with them. I was always too tired. And we'd go up to the mountains for skiing from Christchurch, and come lunchtime, and I'd tell the kids they could go off, and I'd have to sit in the cafeteria. Now we go skiing, and it's flat out all day, trying to keep up with each other. And that's the difference that lifestyle change can make. And I want to share with you, as we draw it to a conclusion this morning, a testimony from a couple of people who've had dramatic changes. This is Pat Quinn. Pat's from Toowoomba, and Pat attended a CHIP program at Toowoomba Seventh-day Adventist Church. Can you get that, just click on that and start that video for us, mate? This is what happens when you give your PowerPoint presentation to the IT blokes. Okay. Pat Quinn, you'll have to take my word for it, came along and did the CHIP program at the Toowoomba Seventh-day Adventist Church. She was in her 70s, she was 74, and she said she was sitting in a chair and her life was just going downhill. She thought it was all over. She did the CHIP program, and during the CHIP program she lost 3.5 kilos. And in the 12 months after, she lost about 30 kilos in weight. And she talks about the fact that she's really excited to be going back and doing what she loves doing, running a counselling centre in Toowoomba. And then she goes on to say that when she started the CHIP program, she never realised it was offered by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And maybe she would have hesitated if she had known it was offered at the church. But she went along and she did it. And it was 2 weeks into the program that she discovered it was being offered by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And she says that they never tried to convert her, and she's a Catholic sister, and she never tried to convert the Seventh-day Adventists. And she says that she's now 74. She feels like she's 50, only she hasn't got the pain in her body that she had when she's 50. And Pat tried really hard to convince the church to run another program. And it took 4 years for her to convince the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Toowoomba to run another program. And now we've got real problems. What have we got there? And can we go to the next slide? Okay, the next slide was going to be a picture. There, one before. We got something there, or we give up on it? Okay, the next slide is a picture of Sister Pat with the CHIP team from Toowoomba. And the slide after that is a picture with Sister Pat, that's it there, Sister Pat, and that's 13 of the 17 people that Sister Pat Quinn personally brought along to the CHIP program at Toowoomba Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I was doing a presentation at Stanthorpe, which is about 100 k's from Toowoomba. And I showed Pat's testimony, and someone said, "That's Pat Quinn, that's why I'm doing the CHIP program." Pardon? That's Pat there in the centre. That's Pat. And Pat, Desiree Arnold, who was running a CHIP program at Caboolture in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, got a telephone call saying, "Are you doing Pat Quinn's CHIP program?" And Desiree said, "Well, I don't know who Pat Quinn is, but we're running a CHIP program. Good, I'm coming along." And 2 people came along because Pat Quinn was passionate about telling people about the CHIP program. Okay, I think we'll give up on the PowerPoint. I was in the Philippines last year, and I met Alan in the Philippines, who had done the CHIP program. He had type 2 diabetes, and he had major kidney problems. He did the CHIP program. Okay, let's just have a look and see if we've got a video. We have, look at that.
Hi, mabuhay. I'm Alan. 6 years ago, I was a diabetic patient. I had a heart attack. I was suffering from hemolytic anemia. I had 4 months of consecutive blood transfusion, 4 bags every month. And I heard about CHIP. So I joined CHIP. I was taking 172 units of insulin a day. And after the 1-month program of CHIP, it went down to 25 units after a month. Then after 3 or 4 months, it's 0. Then now, after 6 years of practicing the CHIP principles that I have learned from them, I'm now leading 6 days a week physical fitness program just to share what I have learned from CHIP. Every Sunday morning during our physical fitness program, we have now 600 people participating and attending to us regularly. Energetic and healthy people joining us every day, from children up to adults. Especially men, coming from my heart, I owe it from CHIP. I love CHIP. I'm endorsing CHIP. And thank you very much, CHIP program.
Now, it's really interesting. That place where they were doing the exercises on Sunday morning with 600 people there is actually in the middle of the cemetery, in the middle of the main cemetery in Manila. But because some people were concerned about health, they reached out into their community. They changed the life of Alan. They changed the life of Sister Pat. God has given us a health message. We've got CHIP facilitators training this afternoon, and then there's a CHIP information session next Sunday, 2 o'clock next Sunday, for the CHIP information session for the CHIP program. God challenges each of us to make choices to follow Him, but also choices to be healthy. Today I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessing and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life, so that you and your descendants might live. God wants us to be healthy. 3 John verse 2. Dear friend, I hope that all is well with you, that you are as healthy in body as you are strong in spirit. Thank you very much. Lord, you created us in an awesome, amazing way. And more than that, Lord, you gave us free will, choice, so that we could love you. Help us, Lord, as we commit to you this week. And help us to make choices that are honouring to you, for Jesus' sake.